Welcome back. I'm going to try to solve some puzzles today, and hopefully it won't be too embarrassing like a few of my previous ones have been. So let's see what happens. Alright, in this position we are not too many moves removed from the opening. However, I see that my opponent has weakened this diagonal in front of the king, so I'm wondering if that has something to do with it. For example, we can check on h5. In that case, it looks like they can just move out of check. They can't block, but they can move out of check. But if they move out of check, our bishop is covering f7, so I think we can then mate right there. I don't think there are any other options, but let me check just to be sure. If we check on h5, our queen is cutting off these squares, and our bishop is cutting off these squares. So the king actually has two choices. Black's king can go to either one of these. Now, if it moves straight forward to e7, then yes, we will checkmate on f7. But if it moves to d7, it's a little different story. So let's follow that out. Check moves to d7. If we check here, they can block with the knight. On e7. Now then we would be able to check here, but I don't know if it would be better with the bishop or the queen. But let's start that off, and I'm pretty sure that's it, because this weakened diagonal has got to be the answer. One other option I thought of was checking here first, and if the king comes out, then we come in, but that just gives up a bishop and it removes one of our attacking pieces. So I think this has to be it. Okay, it did move to d7. So that means when we check here that they can block with the knight or the bishop for that matter. Now if they block with the bishop, we check on f7 and they block with the bishop, then that's mate, because the king then will have no escape squares. But if we check on f7 and they block with the knight, that gives the king an escape square out this way onto the c file. So in that case, that'll be a little harder. But I still think checking on f7 is the best move here. But let's assume they play the best move, because we've already determined if they play bishop to block, then we have a mate. So let's assume they don't do that. Let's assume that they block with the knight, which would be, I think, their better move. Then, if we check here with the bishop, they escape out to c6. And if we check back with the bishop here, guarded by our queen, then they go back. So there has to be another answer then. If we check here, they block with a knight. If we come up with our queen, they can hide back there. I'm just not sure. But maybe, is there anything better? Is there anything better? For example, there's a check here that they can't block. That might be better. If we check on f5, they can't block with a knight. They can't block with anything, and would only have two legal moves. And if they come, we know if they come to e7, we have a mate on f7. And I think the same would be true either way. So I think checking on f5 is better than checking on f7, because as we've said, if we check on f7, they block, and then they're going to have this escape route through to c6. But if we check here, they can't block with anything, and they only have 2 legal moves, and either way we have mate on f7. Pretty sure. So let's try that. Okay, they moved there, and that's checkmate. Okay. Are the peace sounds not working? I had that muted for some reason. Not sure why. Okay. Well, that took longer than it should have. 5 minutes. But the puzzle was rated 2382. Okay. Well, I don't feel so bad about that. And it says suggest theme. Well, that was mate in 1, 2, 3. So I'm gonna click mate in 3+ for the theme. And next puzzle. Okay. We are down material in this position, and we're very close to being checkmated. I'm not sure exactly how close, because we are guarding the f8 square with our queen. But our queen is not guarded. So if we don't do something with our queen right now, they can just take it, for example. If we take their queen, and again, we're already down material, so I don't know that we want to trade queens at this point, other than the fact we have a pawn close to promotion. So, but they have a pawn getting fairly close to promotion, but if it moves, we get their rook. After the queen trade, I mean. But let's see what else we have. For example, we have a check, which I try to look for first, but they just move out of check. Or block, right? They can always block that check because their queen and rook are on the same file. So I don't think that's it, and I don't think this check is it because, again, queen unguarded. So it might not be check. That's just too easy to get out of. If they block with the queen, we can't come back and check here because our knight's in the way. And there are no other checks that are good. With this little material on the board, a queen sacrifice doesn't make sense unless we were about to promote. Because here, you know, if we sacrifice our queen and they capture it and we push our pawn, they're just going to check here and then mate pretty soon after. Next thing we look for, again, I don't think it's checks. So next thing we look for is captures. If we capture here, they capture back probably with the pawn, I'm guessing, because that would undouble their pawns. That would protect the remaining G pawn, and which is protecting the rook. And then we just have a knight to fight against all that with. Their rook can pull back to here someplace and guard the advance. Pardon me, guard the advance of the pawns. So I don't know if that's good. However, if we do capture their queen and they capture back, I don't think it would matter which one they capture back with, but if they captured back with the pawn, I think we can push this one. No, but if they do, if we do push the B pawn and they bring their rook behind it, we can block the rook's path by putting our knight on B4, guarded by this pawn, and they can't stop the promotion. Now, if we captured here, if we capture the queen, give up our queen and the rook takes, and we push our pawn, they can get the rook in front of it. Again, not behind it, because if they get behind it, we block there with the knight. But if they get in front of it, can we get the knight there to guard? No, then we would push this pawn. And then if they get in front of it, we push this pawn again, and it would protect the front pawn. I think that might be it. Capturing the queen, and we're better off if they take with the pawn in advance. But if they take if we capture with the queen and they take with the rook and we push the pawn, I think they're only... No, because the rook would be here. The rook can get behind. No, if it tries to get behind it, we block. Okay. I keep forgetting that. I think its only option would be to try to get in front of the pawn. And then we would push this one. And if they came over, we push this one again to protect the front pawn. That's what I'm going to try, because I really don't see anything else. And that one actually looks good. It looks like we might be able to pull that off. Okay. Oh, they took with the pawn. Okay. So that blocks the rook's path to getting in front of this. And we already know we can block the path to getting behind it. And we're going to promote with check. So I think here we have to push the pawn. Okay. And this seems fairly obvious to me. There's no other way to protect that pawn other than putting the knight in front. I assume once we do that, that they're going to check. Surely they won't sacrifice the rook there for no reason, although they do have two connected passed pawns of their own. But if they check, we move up. And if they check again, we go this way. And we're only one square from promotion. So I've got to move the knight. Okay. Oh, and they brought the king so that we're not promoting with check. We still promote, though, don't we? There's no other move that makes sense here. If we move the knight, they win the pawn. If we move the pawn, they win the knight and protect that square. If we move this pawn, I don't know what they would do. So I'm going to promote. They did check us. I think there's only one legal move here, because the pawn cuts off these and the rook cuts off these, and we can't block with anything, so there's only one legal move. Okay. All right. That one was rated 2264, and my rating is 2263, so I'm catching up. Theme was rooks on the 7th. Well, there was a rook on the 7th. And another theme is knight outpost. Is that technically an outpost? Really, that's just blockading the rook. And pin. Was anything pinned? I don't think anything was pinned at that point. Well, I mean, the knight's technically pinned right now, but okay. I will leave the themes alone then, since I'm not entirely sure. And I'm going to click next, because I'm doing pretty good with puzzles rated around my rating. But I seem like I do worse in these middle game puzzles. This is a middle game puzzle. All our pieces are developed. We've gotten past the opening. Both kings have been castled. And this is also the part of the game that I feel like I'm weakest in. Okay. We do not have any checks except for the queen capturing this rook. But I have to check it out, because we know how many of these puzzles a queen sacrifice is the answer. It's just a lot of them. So let's think about it. Our king is not in danger right now, because we have a rook guarding the back rank, and that rook is protected by the other rook and the knight. Also, the knight can go here at any time. So I'm not worried about the back rank. Also, this bishop is hanging. I do notice that. This knight isn't hanging, but it doesn't have very many places it can go right now safely. This bishop is hanging. And once that bishop is gone, that knight will be hanging. So, let's think about the queen sacrifice, because it is a check. It's the only check, period, in this position for me. So, if I check, they have two ways of recapturing, which I assume they would do one of. And I assume they would capture back with the rook, because that would give them some access to this open file. At that point, I could capture the bishop, but I would still be down 1 point of material. That pawn would be threatening this knight, which is already threatened by the bishop. I don't... And our queen's in danger. If we... Can the queen go anywhere? I don't think that's it, right? Captures. They will move the knight out of danger, and then that pawn is stuck, and this bishop is hanging. Okay, if not checks, then what captures? We can capture here first, which will again threaten the knight. But the knight can just move, as we've already established, and then this bishop is hanging. And our queen's hanging, sorry. Wow. If I capture here, I assume they're going to take my queen. And then that knight is hanging, as well as the bishop. So yeah, I'm going to pause so I don't waste any more of your time, and I'm going to give this some thought. Okay, I've given this some more thought. There are complexities here, and there are several pieces in danger for both me and my opponent. I don't know how we got into this position, but it looks bad. I think if I do anything else besides move my queen, my opponent's first move is going to be to take my queen. And if I capture back, well, let's say that I start by taking the bishop. So that puts me up 3. Let's say they capture my queen. Puts me down 6. If I then take the rook, which... Wait, why did I say my bishop was... My bishop isn't in danger? Oh my goodness, I just threw off my whole thing. Oh my goodness, my bishop is so protected right now. What in the world is wrong with my brain? Okay. All right. Well, I assume that happens to you all too. Okay, so I'm not worried then about my bishop. My bishop is protected by 2 full entire rooks. Okay. But yes, back to my original proposition. If I take the bishop first, I'm up 3. If they take my queen, then I'm down 6. If I capture back with the rook, then I'm only down 1. My bishop is still protected by the other rook. My new rook on c7 is protecting my knight from the queen. Their knight is still in danger, but I'm still down 1 point of material from where I started. And it's their turn after I capture back here. So then they would, I assume, move this knight out of the way, because that knight would be in danger from both my bishop and this pawn that just took here. So they would move the knight out of the way. That pawn then would be stuck behind the other knight, and this bishop would be aiming at nothing. Okay, so that's not it. Taking there to let my queen be captured, because I end up down. If I take first, I go up 5 for taking the rook. They go up 4 for taking my queen. So I'm down 4 at that point. If I capture the bishop, then I'm only down 1. They move the knight, and I'm still down 1. Either way. Okay, another option is to move my queen out of danger by taking this pawn, which puts me up 1, adds another protection to the bishop, which is aiming this way. But their queen is guarded by the rook, though. So yeah, there if I take and they take with the rook. And then what am I threatening? I've lost 2 pieces. I've lost 12 points of material for 10. I can block the threat on my queen by putting my knight here. Why didn't I see that earlier? Because the bishop is protected. Okay, the bishop was protected. That's what I didn't see at first. Their queen is vulnerable. Because there they have to move their queen. Not here, because my knight would be hitting that square as well. If they moved there, then I would take the bishop. I think. And if they took with the rook, then I would take back. So, okay. Wow, that took far too long for me to get to that. So if this is right, I'm going to stop here. And if it's wrong, we'll find out why. But I think the knight to c5 is my best move. It accomplishes multiple purposes. It blocks the rook's attack on my queen. It threatens their queen. And cuts off one of the queen's escape squares. Okay, but the queen could go here or here. The queen could go to a2 or c2 or d1 for that matter. It's home square. But then I win the bishop with tempo. That's what I'm doing. Okay, wow. Wait, they gave up their queen? Oh, because I can't take it because of the rook. Oh my. And now they're hitting the knight twice. Why didn't I see that? Wow. Okay, this is why I fail. I lose my games in the middle game. Most of the time. Yes, occasionally I fall prey to an opening trap and lose early, and occasionally I mess up an end game and lose there. But I think most of my games that I lose are lost in the middle game. And this is why I have trouble seeing all these various lines that can happen. Okay, so yes, I can now take their knight, but then they can take mine, and my queen's in trouble. However, I can take their queen first. Can I not? Because so far, only one thing has been taken, and that's my pawn. So let's say I'm down 1. This puts me up 8. Gets my knight out of danger. Then if they take my queen, I take back. So that would put me down 1 and then up 4. That's got to be right. And at the end of that, that's still hanging. If I've counted this correctly. Nothing else makes sense. Wait, if I do that, can't they just skewer those? Well, if I don't do that, they take me, right? I think I have to take it. But then they line up here. Okay, I'm still down 1 point of material right here, right? I've taken their queen, and my knight's hanging, and they've taken my queen and my pawn. So I'm down 1. If I take the rook, then I'm up 4. They skewer me here with the bishop, right? Hitting both of the rooks. So I would lose one of them, but then I can move the rook. One of the rooks out of the way. I'll still be up 4. If they take the other rook and I take the bishop, then I would only be up 2. But if I don't take the rook, I'm down a point of material. And my knight's hanging. I have to take the rook. Wait, it stops there? Oh my god. Because why? Right? That's got to be their next move. Theme was doubled rook. Okay, well there was a doubled rook. Fork double attack. Possibly. Hanging piece? Well, yes, there were hanging pieces all over the place. Was there a pin? Well, there was at one point when I had the knight in the way. Simplification? I guess that's what we're in the process of doing. And there's a German word that I can't pronounce listed as one of the themes. I think it's German. Zwischenzug. All right. Well, apologies for that taking so long, but I'm switching to the analysis board here. It shows that at the beginning of this puzzle, Black had a very slight advantage, and it would have been about even. We would have been about even in material had they started this sequence by capturing this pawn with the knight. And that was the only move for them that didn't lose. But instead they played that, which is a losing move. But there's... Okay, now according to Stockfish, there's one definitely best move, which is the move that I've eventually found. But there's another move that doesn't lose. Bishop to c5. I could have played my bishop here. And that also leaves me with an advantage. A bigger advantage than I had before their blunder. That's unusual. You see that up there? 6.0 for the move I played. And minus 214 for this. That's unusual in puzzles. Usually one move gives a huge advantage and all the other moves either go to equality or lose. But this one leaves me with an advantage either way. But clearly the best was the one that I selected. Okay, now they have several moves that are not that different from each other. One was the bishop taking the pawn, which they did. One was the knight taking the pawn. And the other was the queen capturing the bishop. I do not understand why it wasn't good for the queen to move out of the way. Is that just because then I just win the bishop outright? But yeah, why didn't what's so bad about their queen just moving out of the way? Okay, that's not that much worse, but then yes, I would capture the bishop at that point. And then they would want to move this knight. And it says they would go back there. I honestly assumed they would go this way. Okay, and it says that one's not... Okay, now that's the best move. Okay, the one that I suggested. I don't feel so bad then. Or even knight here. Because clearly it's in danger. And it also gives this pawn a path off of this blocked file. So yeah. Alright. But yeah, I didn't understand why because then the puzzle would have just ended there. Because I don't have an obvious better move. But the queen didn't go back. So back up. I put the knight there, and then they did what the computer said was best, which is to take this pawn. And now, since the queen didn't move out of the way, it seems obviously best to take the queen, which I did. And their obvious best move is to take my queen, which they did. And I took back. Okay. I hesitated far too long on taking back of that rook because I saw this. But that's my only move that doesn't give the advantage back to white. Okay. But then, right, bishop to e5? It says that's barely their best move. I would have thought that would have been obvious. Then what would I have done? Oh, okay, that's why the puzzle ended there, because I can do several things that all work out okay. I can move this front rook. And no matter where I move it, then they would capture here. So I can move it. Oh, wow, it says I can go to d7 and let them have this rook for... Just have it. Because then I would take the knight. But I was going to take the knight anyway. Right? No, not if I did my second best move, or third best move, which was here. Then when they take this rook, I would take back, and I wouldn't get the knight, because the knight would escape at that point. Oh, and my knight's still hanging. Goodness. Yeah, I have a hard time seeing that this is better for black. Because if I do what it says is my best move, which is here, and again, that's not that much wow, Stockfish is having trouble deciding whether to take the rook or go here. I don't think any opponent I've ever played would have trouble deciding that. They would take this rook pronto. And then I would take the knight with my rook, not with my bishop. Okay, because I think if I took with the bishop, which it says would lose most of my advantage, they would not do this. They would play g4. They're going to play g4 anyway, unless I check, which also loses most of my advantage. The only move that keeps any advantage here for me would be this. And then their best move is g4 to attack my knight, which I've already said didn't have a lot of places to go. But why wouldn't they move that knight? Right? I'm coming for it. Goodness, I don't understand this at all. Oh, now it's changed its mind. Rook to c1 is good. Threatening mate. But if they do that, I play h6. I think. Or even f6, probably. Not g6, because they have a dark squared bishop that can come through there. And I'm way beyond the end of the puzzle, but I'm still trying to see how this is a clear advantage for black. Because we both have a rook, right? We each have a knight. And we each have a bishop. And it looks like, well, I'm up a knight, right? But not really, because they can take it at any time. I'm very confused. But I got the puzzle right. So thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.